some people claim that they could just take the patent because you couldn't afford the lawsuit, or the lawsuit would cost more than you were asking for from the patent. So there's all sorts of games like that. The field of IP, I would defer to someone else who's more qualified in IP, but that's kind of, at least as a biotech startup, that's something that I'm keenly aware of.
Okay. The statement from Moderna chief executive is, quote, "We are filing these lawsuits to protect the innovative mRNA technology platform that we pioneered, invested billions of dollars in creating, and patented during the decade preceding the COVID-19 pandemic," which is...
Well, they are called Mode RNA, or now we just say Moderna, but that was kind of the whole thing behind the name.
Are you saying that M in mRNA is Moderna?
no, no, I'm saying Mode RNA was the name of the company, but
Oh,
now everyone just calls it
Could
Moderna.
just be the other way around.
Modification of RNA. Does do is that Eric?
I'm not sure. I don't think it was that was the reference, but I'll look into it just to confirm.
right. So they might have some very heavy patents with regard to making mRNAs for vaccines, and if so, depending how broad the language is in those patents, uh, they might have a very strong case. So have to read the language. Anyway, I think it'll come down to the language in the patent. Now, how the court interprets the language in the patent.
Which is crazy because there are now patents for organic compounds that
Right.
are found in the wild somehow, or components of them are found in the wild, and here's the special recipe that we're protecting. So it's kind of strange. It's kind of like the I think some folks call it the genomics information technology revolution, and I would say that's kind of the era that we're in.
Okay, here we go. I think we can jump into the tech news. I'm ready. Are you ready? We're ready. Here we go.
Yes.
Happy Friday, August 26th. Top story: T-Mobile and SpaceX partner to let customers in areas lacking T-Mobile service use Starlink for SMS and MMS and quote-unquote select messaging apps. Select apps will work. Some apps on your phone will work, some won't. You've got to love that. In some markets in 2023. And Elon did a tweet about it that I read a few hours ago. I should pull it up because my memory's foggy. But let's see what he said. On this particular topic with the partnership with T-Mobile, he says Starlink version 2 launching next year will transmit data to mobile phones, eliminating dead zones worldwide. Note, connectivity will be 2 to 4 megabits per cell zone, so will work great for texting and voice calls, but not high bandwidth. And Elon did a live stream event.
It'll feel like 20 years ago.
Copy link to tweet. I'm going to pin the link to the Starlink T-Mobile announcement event is now pinned to the top of the room. It's a video. It's 36 minutes long, and you can enjoy that live stream, rebroadcast. Okay. But that's kind of wild that now what I imagine is happening is it can't be that your phone connects directly to the satellite. That's not possible. It is. There are satellite phones, but that's a different technology. They're not going to be. You can't put satellite.
It's not the same band, yeah.
Right. You can't put satellite receivers into every fucking smartphone. That just ain't going to happen. So
An extension cord, Tyler. An
sure, of
extension
course,
cord.
the
Did we
dongle.
cover? Did we
But
cover the? Was
hold on,
it
Tina.
DARPA that was coming up? Sorry.
We're neck deep in the middle of a point here. What T-Mobile must be doing is setting up a whole bunch of Starlink receivers, and that gives access to T-Mobile customers. There might be additional charges or whatever. Maybe there's not. Who knows? Um, but it's a really interesting development because now you, as a cell phone user, don't have to sign up for Starlink and have the monthly fees and the setup cost and the hardware, or whatever, and you'll still be able to know that you have coverage pretty much everywhere for very small amounts of
Can you hear me now?
bandwidth. Can you hear me now? Hello. So,
Yes, we can.
pretty cool development that you would have SMS kind of everywhere as a T-Mobile customer. That's pretty freaking cool, I gotta say. Especially if you're that's kind of genius for T-Mobile, actually, because I would be curious to know what percentage of people would for that would be a primary use case because they work in very remote places or work in places with no coverage. There must be tens of millions of people for whom that's an incredibly attractive offer.
Well, there was actually a person talking about this. Dan, who developed the sweat sensor for sleeping, was talking about. I think there's a town where people work, and they just set up a bunch of Starlinks there because it's a mining town, so they're very isolated to begin with. So to be able to have 6,000 people or so connected, they're combining that, but they also did something interesting to transmit underground. They just installed an LTE tower underground so they could transmit above, and then above they use Starlink to piggyback onto the larger network. So very innovative situation there.
So I've got a few receipts here, Tyler. So I've just heard back from my friend who's on the Wi-Fi Alliance, and he knows all about this stuff. So yes, the phone can do the satellite. It's a 5G standard called MU-MIMO, multi-input, multi-output, MU-MIMO, and apparently it does go straight to the satellite.
Get
So
out of
I would
here.
have had exactly the same reaction. Well, apparently it's existing part of the 5G standard. So two-way communication. There might be one of the reasons it's so low though, because normally a Starlink receiver satellite dish has something called a phased array antenna in it, which can really form the beam, and that you don't have those in a phone. Uh, so yeah, I think that's what's happening, but it's really, really low bandwidth. They said 2 megabytes per cell. So if you've got 1,000 people in that cell, you've now got 2 kilobytes, right? So it's really, 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 really slow. You're talking text messages only, not pictures even. But in the bigger picture, the reason the hookup makes sense is two companies have opposite problems. T-Mobile have a problem that Starlink have the problem that you have rubbish and always will have rubbish bandwidth in a city because Starlink is not designed for high density population. It means that Starlink users can get decent bandwidth in cities, and T-Mobile users can get some form of connection everywhere.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. There is a so the statement here is about the mid band, the gigahertz. I think they were able to put it into the second gen satellites to actually provide that coverage. So I guess that is that is pretty interesting, but it'll probably have to be very focused. So
Yeah, I mean, the guy I asked definitely knows. He's on the standard body that would have approved this standard years ago before it was even built into your phone. So your iPhone you're holding in your hand right now has an antenna that already has the standard that can talk to the satellite. Very low bandwidth, but it's there.
Okay. Okay, Tina, you were saying.
I was wondering if we had covered news out of DARPA that they're kicking off a program to develop, they're calling it sort of the Internet of Satellites for low Earth orbit satellite systems to sort of connect all of the various companies that are deploying these systems.
Yeah,
This was like earlier this month.
yeah, it was announced a week and a half ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I recall reading that headline briefly, exactly as you just said. And it got pretty wide coverage. Gizmodo headline says DARPA seeks Internet of orbiting satellites, low Earth orbit satellites, to connect satellite networks. DARPA teams have started developing unique optical inter-satellite communications terminal. And this is, for those who don't know, that's kind of how the internet started. So, be interesting to see how that plays out when you have private companies like fighting each other to provide this, and then you have DARPA building something.
Well, I
Okay,
think Elon is actually, answering some of those requests for proposals. The Starlink was actually, I think, in response to Mr. Thousand Satellites, which is a podcast episode from Voices from DARPA. And there they talk about that they were wanting to build this constellation, and they put that out there and see who from industry can pull it off. And so Elon's been able to pull it off, and this seems to be the next step in such a program. Okay, now here's the next industrial framework that needs to be set up, and so it's very exciting.
okay.
And Tyler, we have the Apple event next month, so it's said maybe iPhone 14 will be able to has this function to connect with the satellite.
How much
That,
would people pay to be able to
No,
connect to satellite anywhere, though? Like, how much is that worth to folks?
to you mean on
iPhones
a
have been a little
phone?
bit.
Like for
I,
yourself, Tyler,
I,
for
I
Yeah,
you,
mean,
but
in
Eric,
terms of
how
Eric,
much would you
it's
pay for a service?
you need to be more specific. Do you mean without having a monthly subscription and without having to pay and lug around hardware? Like it just
No,
connects.
no, no, no. I'm saying, like, if you had to pay additionally, how much would you pay to be able to connect to Starlink through your phone? So that's the question.
Through the phone without a monthly subscription. You're talking on a monthly basis. How much would I pay?
A monthly basis, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Because I think it'll jump the price of some T-Mobile users. So I'm curious what that number is.
It,
I bet they already have a number in mind, though.
it depends on the bandwidth, but you're sticking with the 2 megabit per second bandwidth limitation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anywhere though.
I could see people paying $100 a month for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I would say I'd pay maybe half that, but I'm not as isolated
You mean
or out
do,
there.
do you mean just for the dead zone in the US? Because
Globally.
I think with this T-Mobile collaboration with SpaceX, it's more on the subscription. That means user just have to pay the subscription with T-Mobile, right? The rest will be
Right?
taken care of by I mean, it'll be sorted out
So,
between SpaceX and T-Mobile, right? Meaning to say that end user do not have to have an extra subscription with SpaceX, right?
Yeah, but how long before Starlink says, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna offer you, in-app purchases here." That's that sort of strategy where they can offer a competitive service. There's nothing that would necessarily stop them. They're already doing somewhat direct-to-consumer sales in some instances with Starlink, so I don't see this being a much bigger jump.
so look, there's a couple of things probably just need repeating. Firstly, since the iPhone 12, you can go direct to satellite. You don't need a new iPhone. You just need 5G. It's part of the 5G standard. The second, megabytes per cell. And if you think about a cell in a city, it might have 1,000 people connected to it. So again, you may, if you're the only person in that cell, it's to do with the land area. This on how big a physical land area it's serving. So that's why they're approximating it to 2 megabytes per cell.
Megabit.
But if you've got 1,000 people there, you're getting 2 kilobytes. And then the third thing to say is that Starlink aren't going to pull the rug from under T-Mobile's feet, because Starlink cannot scale so that it can serve a city with any decent bandwidth. So the only way that Starlink could do that would be have their own cellular network, which I don't think they're planning on doing. So I think the hookup is very simple. T-Mobile provide the dense mast in the cities for where you need a lot of people to have a lot of bandwidth, a lot of megabits per square mile, if you like. And Starlink have a huge amount of square miles that they can cover at some slower speed.
Okay, next up. Mark Zuckerberg talks with Joe Rogan, or he appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast and spoke with Joe Rogan about his life, content moderation decisions, the FBI and the Hunter Biden laptop story, the metaverse, and more. One quote is, "It's almost like every day you wake up and you're punched in the stomach," the billionaire CEO told Joe Rogan. I listened to a little bit of it, and the little bit I heard, he said something quite interesting. He says, "We don't want to be the ministry of truth for the world. We don't want to be making the decisions of what's truth and not, and what should stay on the platform and not, and we want to delegate that out as much as possible." And I love that. And you could tell he was incredibly frustrated with being forced into. He goes, I don't want to be in this position. I want nothing to do with content moderation at all, whatsoever. And please get me out of this fucked up situation that I've been put into of having to police all the content.
Yeah,
And
especially on such a large platform, policing is expensive.
we said that the ministry of truth for every person on the earth, for the entire planet. I was like, wow, what a brilliant way to state it. Like, yeah, you're forcing Facebook to be the ministry of truth for the planet, for 7 billion people. It's a great point. Like, and they shouldn't be forced to be in that situation. And they refuse to be in that situation. It's just a really unenviable situation to be in. But listen to the way he answers the question, and listen to how he really does a fine job of highlighting just how absurd of a situation they find themselves in and having to do that. Like, society forces them to do it, and governments force them to do it. So it's a really interesting.
Tyler, they have a lot. They have their own internal studies on both Facebook and Instagram showing how they actually escalate negative and bad information. They absolutely, they're not some neutral platform just sitting there. They have tons of content that comes up that they amplify, they monitor with their algorithms. So that's a complete overstatement. So to go down that line and say that anyone's forcing them to be the ministry of truth is disinformation. It's bullshit. They have that responsibility. They're a big platform. They make tons of money from
They
this.
don't. They use third parties to do the content moderation.
Because they don't want to do it in house.
Yep.
That's the online because they don't want to do it in house because it's so heinous. So,
And
but they also use algorithms and they also have their own internal researchers. There's a new book that just got released by what's his name at Wired, Stephen Levy, on this, and he says it's they've always clamped down their internal research on how heinous some of this content is and how they repeatedly defer to the money versus looking at the impacts of their content. So if people are more interested in it, there's Stephen Levy's doing it like a podcast circuit right now, but he talks about a lot of the studies that are their own internal people have brought to their executives.
So check this out.
Well,
On this topic of content moderation, a Twitter account called Zero Hedge, which had a whole lot of followers. Anyway, quite a popular Twitter account. 1.4 million Twitter followers, and it was banned today on Twitter. And why that's newsworthy is because of what when Twitter bans you, they show you the tweet that you did that violates their rules. And so he sent a screenshot, and he did I just pinned to the top of the room a blog post that says it shows exactly what Zero Hedge received from Twitter. It says, "Hi, Zero Hedge. Your account, Zero Hedge, has been locked for violating Twitter rules, specifically for violating our rules against hateful conduct." And they show the tweet. And the tweet says, here's the tweet. Get ready. This is really interesting. The tweet is simply 4.9 million illegal aliens crossed U.S. border in 18 months since Joe Biden took office. Report. That was copy and pasted from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, who wrote a blog post called 4.9 million illegal aliens have crossed our borders since President Biden took office. He's simply like retweeting essentially, but without the link to the article. He's just sharing the thrust of the point, which is the data. It's a report, and the report has data, and the data is a number. And he tweeted that number. And by the way, he's not the only one to tweet it. So did Representative Tom Tiffany. I don't know of what's Wisconsin. Wisconsin Representative Tom Tiffany tweeted the exact same thing, and Mark Krikorian, who is the executive director at the Independent Nonpartisan Center for Immigration Studies, also tweeted that. They weren't banned. So why is somebody tweeting a report data that somebody did? Whether or not you agree with the report is a separate issue. How accurate the report is, totally debatable. That's fine. But to say that data is hate speech seems to me a little one bridge too far for Twitter to be taking and banning them. By the way, this is not the first time this Twitter account has been banned. It was previously banned and was only unbanned when Jack Dorsey himself took to Twitter to say that was a mistake.
well, I think he's unbanned as of now, though. So
As of right now?
Yeah, I think so. If you check it now, yeah. So a bunch of flurry of tweets and stuff. So I'm glad to see that. Okay, if there was a suspension, it got quickly rectified. Just as a quick kind of follow up to the previous story, like Zuckerberg in his interview said that he gets only bad news in the morning. When he wakes up, people reserve telling him good news for when they see him in person. So I could just imagine that that's probably perhaps a little bit more common. So it might take until lunchtime some of these things to get rectified. But as of right now, he's back. So.
And just checking. Yes, it looks like the Zero Hedge account is back on because there was a tweet 1 minute ago. There you go. That's weird. That's really weird that the Twitter the account banning is in the hands of and it used.
Here's the question:
David, I
Would
want to
a
make
million?
I want to make a real quick point here, which is as a somebody living far, far, far away from America who thinks of themselves not at all as a Republican or a Democrat. I don't. I have America's policies mean nothing to me personally. I never intend on ever living there again. So I don't take any of the policies. I'm interested in good policy making. I'm a huge fan of countries that do it well. It's an art form. I'm a huge fan of countries that have good governance and make sane, rational policies and behave very rationally and all that. And I'm rather displeased with where America's at right now politically. Having said that, I honestly don't give a hoot about the left or the right or any of that nonsense. And it used to be a question of is Twitter or Facebook or punishing one side more than the other. Both sides are claiming they're being treated unfairly. I mean, Twitter's just coming out by doing things like this. It gives a lot of fuel to the right side because this guy is a kind of right leaning. It gives a lot of fuel to the right to say, there you go, Twitter's incredibly unfair and not even-handed with how they're dealing with the right, and that they have this. This gives them incredibly good evidence of their point. So anyway, you were saying, David.
I was only going to mention it. It may be the fact that this person has 1 million followers and can make a blog post that they could rectify that situation so quickly. They had currency in
Great
this
point.
platform,
Great
but
point.
if without that, I don't know if they get the callback.
Great point.
Do we know what the editorial process looks like? Is it possible that there are individuals who are more vigilant about particular issues that are near and dear to their heart that are making decisions for this guy that was banned, but other people reviewed the exact same tweets and did not delete them? Is this variation in human bias, or what is the process they use? Do we know?
Great
Like,
question.
it would be interesting if there was a system where, it requires 2 out of 3 or something like that. I know for at least euthanasia in Europe, it's 1 out of 3. In Canada, I think it's 2 out of 3 doctors have to agree with you or something to that effect. So it would be interesting to see if for something as serious as, misinformation, we would look at it in that light, that we would want multiple verifications, some sort of system like that, yeah.
So the All In podcast weekly podcast episode just came out about 4 hours ago, and David Sachs makes a really good point about Twitter with this new whistleblower Mudge and how it plays into Elon's case. I wonder if the audio comes through clearly from this.
Authority. He's one of these like white hat hackers. He's somebody who was an early hacker.
Literally, if you were to ask before all of this, before he worked at Twitter, like, who would you want as your chief security officer? Give me a short list. He'd be on it for any company.
Right.
One of the most respected people who points out vulnerabilities. And Chamath or Freeberg, I have a question about corporate governance and what.
So we have to get past that question that he asked Chamath, and then here it goes back to David. Sorry.
The claims he's making are far broader than the bot issue, and far broader than the issues that Elon's raised. So I agree with you about that, Chamath. However, I don't agree that what he's saying isn't specifically helpful to Elon's case. So what he said is, so this is from a CNN business article. He said, Zacho's disclosure argues that by reporting bots only as a percentage of MDAO, rather than as a percentage of total number of accounts on the platform, Twitter obscures the true scale of fake and spam accounts on the service, a move Zacho alleges is deliberately misleading. And then CNN
So wait, what you're saying here, Sachs, just to do the math, the denominator matters here. If the denominator was all accounts, the percentage of bots would be much higher. If the denominator is monthly MDAOs, whatever they created, it would be a much lower denominator, and the percentage would change. I think is. I'm just
reporting what CNN is reporting in terms of what Zacho's alleging. That's what I get on the table. CNN broke the story along with one other news source. Washington Post. Yeah. Basically, what happened is this guy got fired in January and started working with these whistleblower lawyers. They put together a big report, and then that report got leaked to the Washington Post and CNN, as well as people on Capitol Hill. So that's kind of what happened here. So CNN goes on to say, Zacho says he began asking about the prevalence of bot accounts on Twitter in early 2021 and was told by Twitter's head of site integrity that the company didn't know how many total bots are on its platform. He alleges that he came away from conversations with the integrity team with the understanding that the company had, quote, no appetite to properly measure the prevalence of bots, end quote, in part because if the true number became public, it could harm the company's value and image. So this is, again, the Upton Sinclair problem that they're...
I mean, then at a minimum, David...
Ouch. That's huge. That he determined based on the conversations with the integrity team that the team had no appetite to properly measure the prevalence of bots, in part because if the true number became public, it could harm the company's value and image. That Twitter knows what's going on, is obfuscating it from shareholders, investors, even board members, etc. They even say at another part of the podcast that it's because their bonuses are tied to this sort of misinformation situation, and their incentives are diametrically opposed. So, sticky situation there, which is why they've never gotten around to solving it. Wild. Anyway.
Tyler, what we don't know is what they actually did know, because you could really listen to this story and say they didn't agree with me, so I'm pissed off.
Right.
And maybe they didn't agree because they had complexities that could not be solved, and they explained it to you, and we don't really have the full exchange between them. So to say I walked away thinking they don't have the appetite to do this could very well be that I walked away thinking it's a really hard problem that they're unable to solve. Do we know that? Do we have more color on this?
Sounds like Schrodinger's bot problem. Hey, we won't know if we don't look.
Interesting that they're...
No, that's not true. I think that they knew some things, and we don't know what they did know.
But I think it's plausible deniability. They didn't want to take too close of a...
We don't know that.
Yeah, and also I agree. We don't know the full story here, obviously, but there's other layers to what he was alleging. It's not just that there's a bot issue; it's the depth and breadth, the impact of that, and the lack of actual security. So there's people from there's foreign nations, et cetera, that are able to get a hold of accounts, et cetera. So there's other things than just the straight bot issue, and we will learn a lot about it.
Let me just make one comment. Counting things is really difficult, especially large numbers of things. You look at a company with, we had that problem, I think, Jennifer might remember. If you have, we had like 30,000 employees in the company, not really that large, there's no way you could tell how many employees you have at any given time. Around the world, people quit, people join, people, to go on leave. So it is really just difficult to count things. Now, that doesn't mean things don't get counted. So that's really my question. What was it that was counted, and to what extent was it a reasonably accurate number?
Also, yeah, the number, I agree with you. My understanding is it's not the number of bots, it's what certain ones have access, what access people have to that platform. And to your point, a bot isn't just a bot. Like, what is a bot? A lot of people use automated scripts to do a lot of things. Is there a human behind the bot? Like, what is it, one human and 400 accounts? Is it what is the actual script doing that we're calling bot? There's a lot of layers here, and so that is challenging. I completely agree with you.
Alrighty. So next up, Zuckerberg says Meta will debut its next VR headset in October with a better eye and facial tracking features to bolster users' feelings of social presence. And LastPass says a hacker stole portions of its source code and proprietary LastPass technical information 2 weeks ago, but users' master passwords are safe. A federal judge ruled Cleveland State University violated the Fourth Amendment when it used monitoring software to scan a student's bedroom before a remote test. California Attorney General says Sephora will pay $1.2 million after failing to tell customers that it was selling their data, marking the start of CCPA privacy law enforcement. In a series of tweets, Jack Dorsey expresses regret that Twitter became a company, saying the service should be a protocol not owned by a state or company. Well, he tweeted that a year ago as well. He's expressed that previously. The biggest issue and my biggest regret is that it became a company. Yeah, he said that a year ago also.
Did he regret becoming a billionaire because of Twitter?
Good question. Yeah, because he would tell you that he became far wealthier from Square than from Twitter, which is true. So, anywho, moving on. The next one, a judge orders Twitter to give Elon Musk data from 9,000 accounts, Twitter accounts, sampled in Q4 to estimate spam and bot users, but rejects his other demands as absurdly broad. DoorDash says hackers accessed some of its internal tools and customer information after compromising a third-party vendor as part of a recent Twilio breach. And TechCrunch says they have sources that India's enforcement directorate conducted searches at CoinSwitch Kuber for allegedly acquiring shares worth about $200 million in violation of Forex laws. Twitter rolls out podcast integration into its new redesigned Spaces tab, starting with English-speaking users globally on iOS and Android, and they have to credit our friend Jane Wong in Hong Kong for this, because she discovered this. Twitter's in-app podcast player is now launched. And then Twitter wrote a blog post about it that Cheryl kindly just pinned to the top of the room. And it says, integrating podcasts into Twitter Spaces. And Twitter Spaces is Twitter's carbon copy of Clubhouse. It says, integrating podcasts into spaces where audio conversations happen on Twitter is another way we're continuing to invest in audio creators. To do this in a simple and intuitive way that allows listeners to simply hit play and go, we started with a redesigned audio experience in the Spaces tab. This redesign introduces personalized hubs that group audio content together by specific themes like news, music, sports, and more. Now Twitter listeners will be able to easily access a more personalized section of live and recorded spaces, that's really interesting, discussing the topics that are most relevant to them. So now they're going to have replays. What they're now copying the replay. What does Clubhouse call their replays? Replays, yeah. And now Twitter Spaces is copying that, so that your Twitter Space event is now replayable as a form of a podcast. It says, but the selection doesn't stop there. These new hubs will also feature the most popular and engaging podcasts from around the world. Our internal research indicates 45% of people who use Twitter in the US also listen to podcasts monthly. So we're automatically suggesting compelling podcasts to people to help people easily find and listen to the topics they want to hear more about. For example, if someone regularly interacts with Vox content on Twitter, they'll probably see a Vox podcast in a Spaces hub. They're also, by the way, kind of separately, updating the way that the content card, they're called cards in Twitter, inside of Twitter. When you share a link on Twitter, you've noticed that it generates a little image of the content, right? So if you share a New York Times link, it shows a little photo of the New York Times thing, similar to the top of the Clubhouse room where there's a little image there. That's called the Twitter card. It makes a card of the content based on the link. It pulls some information from the source of the link and showcases it for you inside of Twitter in the form of a Twitter card. Well, the point that I'm trying to articulate here is that Twitter is now updating the card feature to allow the publication, meaning the New York Times or whoever, to customize the card. So when the New York Times does a tweet of their own article, they can customize the card, and ostensibly anyone else who shares that link will also get the customized version of the card that the publisher customized. That is really interesting because it was all done very algorithmically, kind of, in a very mechanical, code-driven way, which is very suboptimal. And if a human designer can get in there and design the card in the way that the content creator wants it done, you're probably going to have far higher click-through rates. And that's particularly true if the link in question is a podcast instead of a New York Times article. And you can listen to the podcast directly in Twitter and then keep scrolling as you listen to the podcast. And you're getting multimedia inside of the apps now, where you'll have long-form content and short-form content. So you can be listening to a podcast and doom scrolling endlessly. So very interesting developments going on from a product standpoint over there at Twitter at the moment. Next up, Coinbase launches a voter registration tool. Chief Policy Officer says lawmakers elected in the U.S. midterms will make key decisions on crypto. I wonder if that's what I think it is. That Coinbase knows its future of it's an existential threat, that the correct people who are in favor of crypto win in the midterms, and because if people who are anti-crypto win in the midterms by Coinbase. So is Coinbase's registration tool going to be completely unbiased in highlighting certain candidates? I would assume not, because they don't legally. I don't think they have to be. I think they can really persuade people to vote in favor of the candidates who are likely to be very pro-crypto. I would be shocked if it was otherwise. But that's a really interesting move for Coinbase, assuming Coinbase is going to try and inform people at scale who to vote for in the midterms based on their proclivity for being pro-crypto. That's interesting.
Are you talking about official election or just a public polling?
U.S. election.
You mean a company can do this on behalf of the government?
No, it's not on
The
behalf
voter
of.
registration?
No, a company can tell its customers, "Hey, here's the candidates we suggest you vote for." And so if they, because they have several tens, if not, maybe even 100 million, well, not Americans. Of Americans, they probably have 10. I don't know. If somebody know how many American users Coinbase has, I would guess it's somewhere. I think it's 10%. So that would be 30 million. So if you have, 10% is the total number of crypto users. So probably maybe half that. So let's say 15 million, 15, 20, 25. So if you got 20 million users in America who are about to vote, you're really going to hope they vote for the candidates that are going to keep you in business and not the candidates who are going to very swiftly put you out of business. And they're maybe, in a way, perhaps that's brilliant. Why don't more companies do that? Then maybe there's laws against it, but maybe there's delicate ways that it can be executed. I don't see why not. Can companies not be proactive about who they support?
Corporations are people. People have free speech, money speech.
They can give money to candidates. Why can't they say who they're giving money to? Of course they could. So I don't see what the problem would be. Anyway, that's an interesting move. It's like, hey, everybody, you like crypto? We do too. Yeah, don't lose your life savings. Vote for this candidate and make sure you don't vote for this other candidate so that we don't die as a company and you don't lose all of your crypto. You love having crypto? You don't want to see it all disappear tomorrow? Great. Make sure you don't vote for this jackass and make sure you vote for this other genius. I assume that's what this is about.
Senator John Anybody wants to take your crypto. Make sure you stop him at this next voting stop.
For the non-Americans in the room, what Eric is trying to do is simulate a political ad trope that we hear all too often in America on commercials. So Bloomberg's reporting that OpenText plans to buy UK-based enterprise software called Micro Focus. Who cares? Next is from Vice. The iPhone's lockdown mode disables several features, including loading custom fonts, making it easy for websites to identify that a visitor is using that mode. I don't think that's such a big deal, honestly.
Tyler, I'd like to make a comment on the OpenText microfocus. Just
okay.
The joke in the technical world has been that microfocus is the nursing home for software. It's where all the old software has accumulated over the years. So they have a really large repository of legacy software that continues to live, and it's potentially a good revenue source, and it can be important. And OpenText, of course, has been actively trying to become a bigger and bigger software vendor in the market. So I think it's something to keep in mind. I agree with you. It's kind of at the end of the day, who cares? But there's some weight there that I think can be significant. There's some surprising pieces of software that suddenly spring up, like the COBOL compiler, for example, that like it's not an issue until suddenly like there's a shortage of people and you have to go look for them. From that standpoint, it's noteworthy. Thanks.
Sure. So the next one is a whole bunch of fundraisings. Google says it removed over 2,000 personal loan apps on the Play Store in India from January to July this year after they were found to be in violation of its policies. In July, Google changed how its flights tool calculates emissions. Twitter admits mistakes over the past week after adding misinformation labels to COVID-19 tweets from doctors and scientists. Ouch. That had to sting. A firm got its ass kicked in its quarter earnings report. Q4 revenue up 39%. Stock fell 12%. Meta made 68 newsworthiness allowances from June 2021 to June 22 for content that may have violated Facebook or Instagram's rules by letting the pieces stay up. Binance and FTX are among 22 investors that indicated their interest to buy Voyager Digital's assets. Instagram defaults new users under 16 to its most restrictive content setting. That's cool. Google plans to add clear labels to search and maps listings for facilities providing abortions after a group of U.S. lawmakers urged it to fix abortion searches. That's the kind of conclusion of that drama we read about last week. Yeah, so they're going to add clear labels on search and maps listing facilities that provide abortion. So that, remember I mentioned like whose fault is it really if you end up going to a place that does the opposite of what you assumed you were looking for? Is that Google's fault that you didn't really investigate what that facility offers? Is Google? Do we delegate all responsibility for all of our decision making to Google? Because people seem to have a propensity for wanting to do that. And
Just on the just wanted to say that Katarina's room last night actually had a researcher come in and talk about abortion alternatives and methods of doing it safe at home, and how sovereignty over one's body is something that we should strive to protect, even in a post Roe v. Wade is now gone kind of world. So I'd recommend folks check that out, and that's the Science Society here on Clubhouse. Yesterday's episode.
Yeah, and it was interesting that there's some organizations in Mexico that are providing free abortion medications to people in Mexico and in the U.S. And I'm wondering if they'll be able to escape the legal issues because they're in Mexico, not in Texas. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks.
okay. Google Waze, the transportation app, plans to shut down its carpooling service. And there you go. Those are your big boring tweets for today now, or big boring headlines for today. Now we go into the tweets. Did anybody have a particularly interesting tweet since we met last time? Going once. Going twice. Hassan in the audience found this one that I'm retweeting from Elon Musk, that Elon Musk 10 hours ago tweeted, as he's done previously, or has said previously on multiple occasions, that population collapse due to low birth rates is a much bigger risk to civilization than global warming. And this is a tweet thread. He says, sure, in the second follow-up, he says, mark my words, or mark these words. Next, and then he follows up again saying, and I do think global warming is a major risk. And then someone named David Lee, who's the host of a YouTube channel, asked Elon, are people too pessimistic about the future, thus having less kids? Is part of the solution inspiring people to become more optimistic about the future? Elon says yes. Someone else asked him, is having kids the only solution? I think there needs to be a ton of education on this issue. Elon says yes, assuming that he's answering the first part of the question, is having kids the only solution? To which I would raise the point about the CCP's rumored interest in creating babies in labs without human mothers, and what's the words we're looking here for? Full term incubators of sorts?
Baby factory?
Artificial,
Yeah.
artificial womb.
Artificial wombs is what they were called in the article. So when you combine genetic engineering, genetic editing, genome editing, with artificial wombs, and what happens when your parents are the state?
You get the Empire from Star Wars.
You do. You get stormtroopers from Star Wars, is what you get.
Is the Matrix actually? It feels exactly like the Matrix. But I mean, just the artificial womb part, because
By the way, for anyone who might think that that's a crackpot idea, China is obsessed at the moment with its tanking birth rate. It might be it is an existential threat to China if they don't fix this issue, and I don't see how they're going to fix it any other way, unless they come up with very, very extreme incentives and punishments for people to have lots of kids, which they can't afford to have.
And they don't have the right immigration culture policy.
To put it mildly. So, thank you for finding that one.
Can I just state the obvious? It's kind of disturbing. It hasn't come up. in no small part, climate change is a consequence of overpopulation. And, in a consumer based economy, having more people causes more consumption, causes more global warming. So, worrying about climate change and depopulation in the same breath is kind of an oxymoron of thought.
Well, there was so in the U.S., replacement level fertility, that is, children per woman, it went from 1.47 to 1.4 just during the pandemic, and sustainable levels are 2.1. And so that's just a fact for that's a mathematical fact. Even before we get into anything about what responsibility we have to keep the species going, so I think it just needs to become cheaper and more affordable to have a family. So,
The replacement rate would depend on longevity, right? If we live to 500 years old.
But you need to have healthy people there.
Okay, next
yeah,
step.
but you need younger people also having children because nature is kind of unfair that way. The older men get, well, they accumulate some wealth, but also the likelihood of genetic issues when you do try to have children at an older age as a man, you can have problems. So I think it's just something that has to be out more in the open as a discussion because we often talk about overpopulation of the planet, but that's more in these urban, highly concentrated areas. So I'm glad that at least Elon is talking about it, even though it is controversial and very loaded right now.
Well, if we live to 500, I'm sure we'll solve the problems of the age at which you can reproduce and things like that. So who knows?
David Sinclair did a tweet about that yesterday, saying that he's in his lab. He's sort of one of the world's foremost authorities on aging and reversing aging, and which he's repeatedly done in his lab in mice. That he has mice in his lab who he has extended the sort of birthing window for the female mice, the, the, and even by extending their lifespan, it does. He was saying on his Twitter account yesterday that it does expand the birthing window, so you have a longer period of time before menopause in mice. And then the question is, does that translate directly to humans? We don't know yet, but it's a really interesting idea. So, BB just found one that a new iOS update, which will come out next week, by the way, won't make it so people can see your exact location on Instagram. I didn't know there was a rumor otherwise. Ken just found one. Speaking of the new operating system for the iPhone, iOS 16.1 will let iPhone users delete the Wallet app amid antitrust concerns over Apple Pay.
Sounds like the browser is all over again. Remove this browser, you can't include it.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the same thought that went through my mind. Anyone else have a really good one? Durable coating kills COVID virus, other germs in minutes. There'll soon be a new weapon in century-old battle against germs. A durable coating that can quickly kill bacteria and viruses. Okay. Wearable textile-based pneumatic energy harvesting system for assisted robots. Everyone could use a third arm sometimes. So the idea is a new wearable textile-based, meaning clothing, pneumatic energy harvesting system, meaning your clothes convert your walking into storable energy, essentially, or your
I
movement.
found, I found one that interested me, and that was a French company improved their blood glucose measurement that involved just sort of a watch, and then but then you did have to pay $99 a month for something that you refilled, but it was not it did not involve sticking someone in something into your body, and they improved the accuracy so much that it's getting to the point where maybe in a year or so it could be used.
Yeah, that's the microwave technology, or at least some of the coupled split ring resonators. Some teams have developed quite novel methods of continuously monitoring glucose very non-invasively, in so much as that it could fit in a smartwatch. So it's very exciting.
You could even then connect it to an insulin pump and then cut out the human labor factor. And if you trust the sensor enough to communicate with the pump, then you could have
Yeah,
your
and
your
I
insulin
just
dose.
wonder how Apple is doing with that too. I haven't, I guess they're working on it, but I haven't heard any announcements.
So what happens then when we master that technology, which we will do in the next 5 years, and diabetics will have automated insulin injections based on their blood glucose levels in real time. How long will it take before somebody gets the bright idea to do the same with serotonin and dopamine and other more interesting neurotransmitter chemicals and whatnot? Antidepressants, for example, or anti-anxiety, so that you could blend all those together and create a sort of chemical, you know, optimal state of being at all times.
Yeah, actually, one of the teams here in Canada at the University of Waterloo, out of the Center for Intelligent Antennas and Radio Systems, actually developed such a sensor. So, if anyone's curious, you can head over there to read more about it. So, it's really exciting.
Okay, Paul.
And if I'm not, and I believe they're working with the French team, so the collaboration is multi-country. So,
Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen is going to be part of the largest art auction ever to sell his $1 billion collection of art through Christie's auction house. That's a lot of art. Zuckerberg tells Joe Rogan that the FBI warning prompted Biden laptop story censorship.
So Tyler, that's his estate, right? Because Paul Allen's dead, right?
Yeah, he passed on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in an interview with Joe Rogan, Mark Zuckerberg says the story was flagged after an FBI warning about Russian misinformation, and that's why they were pulling down articles about Hunter Biden's laptop, and that caused people on the right to wonder, why is Facebook not letting this story be shared? And now Mark says it was because the FBI told us it was Russian misinformation, but it wasn't. Interesting times. So the next one is there's I guess a lot of rumors going around that Instagram is sharing precise location, so they had to make an announcement that Instagram says precise location is never shared. Responding to viral claims online, Instagram says it does not give out users' exact locations. Yeah, I wonder how did it get to that point that there's a meme going around that they do?
Just turn it off in your phone settings, right? Take control of it yourself.
This just speaks to the level of stupidity and gullibility of your average
That's what the
social media.
meme says that you should do. It says go and disable, quote, precise location.
Hmm.
well, there was an API a few years ago that was sufficiently open so that on one of these kind of I think it was a dating app or something where you could actually find a more precise location. So I think they've become a little bit more careful with their geofencing or radius kind of limits and thresholds.
Okay. So the next one is NATO investigates from the BBC from Saudamini. NATO investigates hacker sale of missile firm data. Hackers are selling classified documents online after obtaining data belonging to missile maker MBDA. And we covered the Paul Allen story. Saudamini also found one. The headline reads, "Lights Out? Swiss meaning Swiss people from Switzerland, brace for looming power shortages. And here's the question: why would Switzerland be bracing for power shortages?
Who is Vladimir Putin?
Switzerland is among the world's wealthiest countries, but its reliance on Russian gas and French nuclear power, both in short supply, has it bracing for power shortages. And the next one is NASA helps minority-serving institution refine tech proposals. Okay, and then Saudamini found one: shoppers to shun online retailers who charge for returns. 4 in 10 customers in the UK will turn their backs on online retailers who charge for returns. And the next one says Mark Zuckerberg thinks, quote unquote, normal people won't want Neuralink chips in their brains. This is his argument for why VR will, and the metaverse, is so interesting. But sees a future where people text their loved ones by twitching their wrists. Because that would be your input, ostensibly.
So the Neuralink thing is kind of the logical equivalent of whether you want your phone battery replaceable or built in.
There's already stories of people typing through their thoughts, converting thought to text. Assuming you could do that without any strong medical difficulty, that you're starting to convert thoughts into not only text, but what if you could create thoughts into
Images.
Images, right? Well, more specifically, what's the Dolly, the OpenAI Dolly generator, where you can give it any string of text, and it will create rather shockingly impressive visual illustrations. It will visualize whatever text you give it in very kind of mind-blowing ways. So if you could have thought connection to OpenAI's Dolly 2 and create not only 2D images, but environmental, like Star Trek holodeck experiences. So you think something and create it without even needing to verbalize it. You're starting to bridge the worlds between your imagination and a virtual, digitally manifested metaverse form of reality. You're able to create environments that others could participate in, for example, digitally, because in the metaverse you can invite people into those environments that normally you would have to code and create. But what if you're able to create them instantaneously through something like Dolly 2, which can create images instantly? What happens when it switches from creating 2D images to 3D environments? Like I want to go, I create an environment that is like Paris in 1920s. I would love to go to Paris in the 1920s, which I would love to do, by the way. And so if Dolly 2 could manufacture that, and I believe it could, and create a Parisian cafe on the Champs-Elysees in the 1920s, I believe it will be able to do that in the next few years in a metaverse 3D environment, not just a 2D image. It could do a 2D image right now. And then I could say, and I want to invite Ben and Tina and Bibi to join me there. And they could. And now they're participating in my imagination. And I would also love a bot of Albert Einstein to join us that is well versed in every thought of Albert Einstein and every utterance of Albert Einstein. And it could very accurately represent Albert Einstein in our, coffee conversation. And then now you have Ben and I and Bibi and Tina having coffee with Albert Einstein in 1920 Paris. How is this not going to happen? But my point is that you can do that in VR in a really clunky way in the if all of us, instead of using Oculus and Metaverse VR, we were using uh, uh, what's the Elon Musk technology called?
Neuralink?
Neuralink.
Neuralink.
If we're all using
Well,
Neuralink,
called a neural lace. What he's making, the company is Neuralink, but the actual I think device will be called a neural lace.
right? But if it can tap into the visual processing parts of the brain, and we're able to have a shared visual experience, and at some point you could close your eyes and your brain won't really be able, it won't be so incredibly different if you're tapping directly into the brain. What your eyes see are purely uh, communicators to your brain, and if you're able to communicate directly to the brain, your brain, it could be easily fooled. It's a wild thought. So it's so profound. I have to imagine that the benefit, the perceived benefit of doing Neuralink is so much of a magnitude that we're going to pursue that as humans full thrust until we get there.
Could I make a prediction?
Sure.
We're not going to generate millions of Beethovens and millions of Einsteins, but what we're going to realize is that the extent to which the internet has allowed people to express their creative skills in a lot of ways that were previously unrecognized, unknown, that what you're describing and what is inevitable, just a question of how long, um, will reveal the creative capacity of the average person is orders of magnitude more than they realize, orders of magnitude more than is represented, because what we're essentially doing is shortcutting the process of taking creative electrical impulses in the brain and executing them into first a digital space and then ultimately into a physical space. And that transformation process from thought to creative art, whether digital or physical, is the hard part for humans, and it's what's locked inside of our skulls. And by simply exposing that at scale in ways that can be communicated amongst us, we're going to discover that creative talent is far less of a specialty, far less of a rarefied capability, and is part of the operating system of the human brain. And it is going to be transformational in ways that go way beyond what the internet has done.
I'll
So I
take.
hope we can.
I want to raise a counterpoint, which is I'm concerned that creativity is falling off a cliff in the age of TikTok, and YouTube and what have you, and that I believe you'll have people will be able to very easily. Everyone will be very seamlessly be able to create immersive environments that they can share with others. However, you will have people who are particularly far gifted and genius at it, and they'll be able to share theirs, and theirs will be the ones that everyone else will be very excited to participate in. And as an example, everyone can make a birthday cake, but or a hotel room. Everyone can design a hotel room, but we celebrate and pay incredible amounts of money for the people who can do it far, far, far better than most. And the same is true of food and fashion. The people who can really make incredible fashion make billions, and most people cannot. And the people who can make incredible food, and what jumps to mind instantly is Rene Giuseppe at Noma in Copenhagen. Holy shit, is what he creates it's mind blowing, and I happily pay $400-$500 each year on my birthday to go and experience that. And I could never in my lifetime do what he does. I have to imagine the same will be true of the metaverse immersive environments and experiences, that there will be geniuses, creators will be able to conjure up scenarios and environments that are just beyond our own mortal repertoire, and we will pay handsomely for the most extreme versions of those experiences.
Tyler, do you
I would
think
think
this will
there.
help deaf, dumb, and blind people express themselves better?
Yes, absolutely.
I would think. I would think it would be both. It would help with the creativity, and would also, there would be ones that people want to enjoy that others have created. But what it makes me think of is I was thinking how, you might have it'd be fun to be able to be like in a movie that you liked. And it made me think of this old movie with Woody Allen that he made called The Purple Rose of Cairo, where the characters live it during the Depression and they end up going into the movie. So if you haven't seen that, it's interesting.
So I wanted to comment a little bit on this. I totally agree with you, Tyler. I think one of the best things about these tools and the idea of using AI to help us, because I truly, stupid phone, um, it's a collaboration. And what these virtual tools and these worlds will allow us to do is materialize outside of ourselves, outside of our brains, what we think and what we see in our heads, that we've maybe some people haven't been able to express outside of our minds. And to your point, what I started thinking as you were talking was, how will we be able to, I don't want to say advertise, that's not the right word, but how will we be able, where and who's going to come up with the best way to search these worlds, search these immersive realities or whatever it is that we're going to be creating, so that they can be found, so that everybody does have a chance to say, come look at mine. And how are we going to be able to do that? Because what we've been doing, and I think you've talked about this, I haven't heard the extent of it, but the idea that we're no longer going to be searching with words, but searching with images and pictures in the future. And that's where virtual reality will take us. And to your point about, I don't know if it's the cream rising to the top, but like the best things rising to the top, or where everybody sort of gravitates to. The hope is that with each one of us being able to show what it is we think and what the pictures we build in our mind, for those of us who do build pictures in our mind, of showing that people who haven't been able to express themselves well, and I'm one of those people that struggles a little bit, this next phase of technology will allow us to express ourselves better. And to, I think, Joyce, it was your point, those who are blind, deaf, and in some way hampered by their limitations, that these technologies allow us to do that. But I question, how are we going to be able to find those places? What is the search
Yeah,
technologies going to let us get there?
yeah. The on the smartphone, the interface that's dominating at the moment is TikTok for discovering windows into other people's perspectives. But what does the metaverse, which hard to imagine the difference from an interface, what the interface difference between the metaverse and the brain link or neural link metaverse looks like, um, and what the discovery interface will look like is anybody's guess at this point. Um,
Just as a quick side note here, I put in the prompt of what Tyler said he wanted to see Champs Elysees in the 1920s. So that's what OpenAI Dolly 2 punched out there in my PCR.
see what you got. Oh, there you go. Yeah, holy shit! I would love to, yes, be in a rainy Parisian cafe in 1920s, and we
Tyler,
will soon enough. Yeah.
Tyler, after using Dali, I and Chris, we know we challenge each other with some very strange thing. And in the end, you found you need to be very literally. I mean, if you're not good at language. And in Dali, you can input any kind of language. I mean, I can use Chinese directly. So I mean, even in the metaverse, if you want to create that environment, you have to learn that background knowledge first. So if you don't have that kind of knowledge, you can't create sophisticated environment. So just like the blind people, if they never see this world directly, how could they create a world like we see? That's the problem. So in the end, like using Dali in the end, I mean, you that's another kind of skill set. So it's not like you don't need to have to good at drawing or good at like uh, uh like drawing. You have to I mean to show the image you want to show by your hands, but right now it all depends on your language ability. So it means you have to experience more, you have to read more, you have to learn more before you can create that. So even it's in the metaverse, even it's using the neural link, that's just the AI or the algorithm in the future to interpret what you said, what you say, or what you think in your head. But I mean, in the input side, you have all this. No matter it's using Neuralink or using just like now you just text to image, it's using text. Then in the future, maybe it's just by saying it. Actually, it's all the same thing. It's just different interface and then different tool to interpret it. So I think right now, because Neuralink and John always said the risk of implant in your head, yeah, there's higher risk than we might want to endure right now. So, but just like Dali or what you said in the metaverse, we create a virtual world by no matter you say it, write it, or in your the image in your head. That is that's just the different. I mean the interface is what the technology should improve, but a newer link that is just a different kind of interface we input. But right now, the risk is too high to take, so we just see it's used by some medical problem patients.
All right.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm just saying it right now. The new tools like Dali or Midjourney or yesterday there's another kind of I forgot the name, another AI. Actually, there are like dozens of these open AI projects to let you use text to image directly, and they are just providing a different interface, and you have to get a new set of your skill. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that that's. I came across a term what that's referred to nowadays. So I don't know if it's established or not. But watching a video the other day about like neural engineering and these deep networks, the term was prompt engineering. So you have to actually prompt the machine. So the way that people interface with these things is a matter of how you ask the question. And so that seems to be the important thing, because what you train it on, well, it's just making a prediction. How can I finish this sentence? But understanding that that's how you have to frame the question, that it almost takes a while for you to learn how to talk to the computer, at least this generation. So that was something that was very nuanced and interesting, and I'll try to share the link here in a moment.
Hey,
Okay.
Cheryl, are you going to pin that thing from the information that you said you were going to do a while ago?
Yes, but
So,
before that, I think Tyler wants
Yeah,
to talk about
the article
this
that's
one that
currently
we
pinned
just
kind of
mentioned.
speaks for itself. Go
It's
ahead
still there.
and show what
Okay,
Ken wants to show.
basically, I think we all know that Neuralink has a competitor called Synchron who has already got FDA approval for human trial. So apparently, from the Reuters article a week ago, that Elon Musk has actually approached them to suggest, maybe to propose a investment in the company, so that they are not going to be too far behind.
Go ahead
Tyler,
and
you
show
have
the
it?
one that Ken was talking about.
Yes, from the information. Yes, can go ahead. I'll pin it now.
yeah. So the problem with the information is a really expensive publication, so I don't have a subscription. I don't know anybody here who does. So we hit the paywall, but usually you could get a good idea from it, the part that you can read, which I don't know if she's printed it yet.
Yep,
So let
I'll
me
pin it now.
yeah. So it says, let me bring this up now. I have to figure out how to bring this up. Hold on a second. It says AWS prepares Bastion cloud services for advertisers. Amazon Web Services is preparing to unveil a cloud service to help companies improve the way they target ads to potential customers without violating data privacy laws, according to three people with knowledge of the product. The move comes as advertisers try to recover from and get ahead of Apple's and Google's restrictions on their ability to track customers online. The new AWS service, Bastion, is known in the tech industry parlance as a data clean room. I always thought it sounds like a chip thing, but okay. It lets multiple companies pull data they have on existing or potential customers without any of them being able to view the entire pool. The idea is to protect the identity of customers both for privacy reasons and out of competitive concerns. In these metaphorical rooms, companies pooling data, for instance, a retailer like Target and a streaming service that sells ads, such as HBO Max or Hulu, could see how much overlap there is between their respective customers and use that to determine whether Target should target well, I didn't write it like that. They wrote it like that. Target should target. So the Target company should target newer repeat customers through ads on. Then it goes blank because you hit the paywall. But I think you can get the gist of it, and so I just wanted to bring that up.
I got to get going, but I found Saudamini rather found the best article of the day for sure. So MVP award goes to Saudamini today. Here I'm pinning it to the top of the room. It's from the BBC, and it says a startup denies using technology to turn call center accents white. A Silicon Valley startup has developed technology that can change the accents of call center workers in real time. The company called Sanas has told the BBC its technology could overcome accent-based prejudice and reduce racist abuse faced by staff. But some critics have called it a move in the wrong direction and say language diversity should be celebrated. News site SFGate accuses Sanas of making the agents, many of whom are from the global south, quote-unquote, sound white. Sonos, which has reportedly received $32 million in funding, describes this technology as accent translation tool, which no doubt they would argue they're helping people be more easily understood and communicate more effectively or clearly, and probably does, in fact, reduce uh, accent prejudice and some form of telephone racism.
Thank
And
you for calling the call center. Thank you for calling the call center. Help.
right, so by the way, these call centers, I know because I have friends who run some of the biggest one of the biggest ones. One of the strategies that they've employed is when somebody calls, if their client is a massive global company where they have customers everywhere in the world, they will try to match the, the caller with a receiver who has a similar accent. So if you're calling from Texas, they'll try and match you as best as they can with somebody from Texas because they know you'll more likely to have a favorable interaction. Similarly, if you're from, the UK, and particularly Scotland, they're going to try and match you with somebody from Scotland as best as they can, because they know that will result in the highest satisfaction just based on billions of phone calls, customer survey data. So, is this is such an interesting point? Is this something that should be embraced or not?
I'm voting yes.
Who votes yes, along with Tina and myself? Feel free to vote no.
Yes.
Okay, we got a bunch of yeses. Flash your mics on stage if you vote no, that we should not embrace this technology, or you take the point of SF Gate in implying that this is what is the claim here exactly? Critics claim what exactly?
Well, I think the headline is misleading because
Yes.
I don't think they're going to turn accents white. They're going to turn accents into whatever
Audible.
flavor is most customer friendly. So it
Right.
just depends on who the customer is.
Well, by the way,
And
the same is true of genders to a degree, where if a woman calls it, try and match it with a woman. If a man calls it, try and match it with a man. What if they do that automatically with the voice technology? Should they or should they not do that?
hasn't Apple already experimented with that? That they found with some of their stuff that female voices do better with both men and women.
Yes. Neutral, even. Yeah, female does do better than male, but I think you're going to end up having Siri and Alexa, and the reason they're all female is for that reason that you're mentioning. But I imagine uh, we might even have more neutral voices in the future, and ethnically neutral voices as well. But the key is that they're very intelligible is the main thing. By the way, I mean people, the most intelligible voices I've ever heard are from Singapore. Like Singaporeans speak with incredible clarity when they speak, like ones who moved to America, or like Southeast Asians when they move to the States speak with notable clarity in their pronunciation. What is that a problem that they speak wider than white people? I mean, if we're gonna take the point of SF Gate, that clarity uh, of dialect is whiteness as they're calling it, then don't the many of my Asian friend, my former girlfriend was of Chinese origin, and her friends speak with a remarkably clearer accent than any white people I know. And what does that mean? Does that mean that they're even whiter than white? What is that? It's just a weird thought.
So Tyler, and even before we started in the United States, before we started exporting call centers all over the world, a lot of companies would put their call centers in Nebraska, and the reason was because Nebraskans typically didn't have regional accents like I have a regional accent because I have a New York accent. So they wanted to get Americans, even though I obviously speak perfect English, but they wanted to get Americans who
Perfect
could speak
Brooklyn
the
English. Yeah. Go ahead.
most unaccented, so they would put them in Nebraska because this way they wouldn't have a northeastern accent, they wouldn't have a southern accent,
Right.
and so yeah, this is not new. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
when you travel to UK Heathrow Airport. It's famous for having London is famous for having 19 dialects of English, and I had a hard time understanding people in England for the first 2 hours before my ear became attuned to it. And I come from Canada, which is very
Oh,
multicultural with lots of accents. So I think the accent problem is a very real issue, especially if you're talking
okay.
about a loaded situation where your subscription is not working and your phone is broken and blah blah blah. That in any way, if you can reduce the tension, I think every bit helps.
Okay. So how about this? The SF Gate, which is a publication based out of San Francisco, when they write in an English that is stereotypically white. Are they consciously doing that? And should they stop doing that? If they're going to accuse call centers of trying to sound white, well, you're sounding white in text format.
How about we let the caller have the options? Because right now we have, I mean, if you are not using a direct phone, right now we can use the smartphone. So actually you have this interface, then maybe it can provide options you use it or not, and you can provide like a bunch of the language options or accent options. So if you have hard time understand the one who provides service, sometimes the Cathay United, I mean the airlines, their call center, some of them are speaking I mean they are India, so they have India accent, and really had a hard time to communicate it, because you have to check with your bookings. You have to give him your name in English, and they have to respond. I mean that is sometimes is troublesome.
Okay,
So yeah, so the
check
idea
this
is
out.
providing options. Yeah.
So should an Indian person in the metaverse not be able to use this tool and embrace their Indian accent when they, are casually, personally perusing the metaverse of the future?
My point is, if the option is, I mean, if that's the one who calls to choose, then there is no by default to to alter the accent of the original speaker.
Right.
So the
Because
responsibility is not
my guess is in the metaverse, as in I imagine in video games, you're going to have more white folks uh, projecting their image as I, probably, I would imagine, black primarily if they're going to be fluid, racially fluid. Like when you choose video game characters, guys often will play female characters. I guess women also choose male characters. That'd be interesting to see the how often men choose female characters when possible, or women choose male characters, and or if you can choose the race of the character, who chooses which races. That to me, that could get very, very interesting when we go from video games into the metaverse, especially
Ty-
because there's such a huge cultural, historical issue around the issue of blackface, which in a video game, no one's really gonna is ever. There's no real issue there when you're playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out. No one's accusing you of doing blackface if you're playing a black character. But when we go to the metaverse, I can imagine that might become an issue.
Tyler, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Okay, so wouldn't the metaverse be a great place for us to experiment with this universal translator and being able to have uh, some type of software that integrates with the metaverse that will provide cross culture, cross language? Because when you start talking about blackface and some American of European descent guy using a blackface but sounding white, that's kind of, you would still know who you're talking to. But when you get someone that's using it and it comes across as being someone of that particular ethnic background, it's a little bit more authentic. But I was just thinking as you were saying this, that it would be great if we could integrate a universal translator where
right,
whether you're from China or India or
right,
Africa or Asia, I mean, from Malaysia, that you would be
yeah,
able to speak your language and it would come across in the dialect of the person that you're talking to, translated to the person you're talking to.
right. So here's what the point I'd like to end on, and thank you to Saudamini for finding this really interesting article. Um, is that technology has consistently, if we look at what technology is doing, almost like it's an alien technology that's been thrust upon us. And at times, maybe it is. Maybe a lot of the maybe this is some kind of alien life form that's sending blockchain to us to bring us into some kind of inevitable future. So what technology is doing fundamentally is dissolving boundaries of time and space and of distance between us, temporally, physically, emotionally, and I believe even racially. And this is where this example that I'm leading to is the metaverse will completely obfuscate and dissolve the boundaries, and blur the lines of different groups when we are able to fabricate them at will, like a Dolly 2 photo. So even identity becomes, even our own egos become sort of shattered. All these forms of boundaries and labels get really challenged fundamentally as technology evolves, and so that's why I think this is so interesting to see what the social anthropological effects of this will be. And no doubt there'll be interesting debates about it. So anyways, I'll leave everyone with that thought today, other than my thank you, and a personal thank you to some folks yesterday, like Shane and Mindless and Angelica and Evan and Jeff G and everybody who's been helping me with my Google ranking scheme. I appreciate it. As Saudamini and everyone who's done BB, and half the people on stage have done it. You all know I'm. It's if you're interested in helping me, it's a good cause. So just DM me on my personal Twitter DMs, which you can see in my Clubhouse bio page. It takes 10 seconds, literally. So if you have 10 seconds to spare to help out your homie and moderator, I'd appreciate it. And other than that, I just want to say thank you to everybody again for another fantastic Tech News Around the World. So there we go.
Thank
We did
you.
it.
See you
Boom.
next week.